The morning sun hammered down on Atlanta with the kind of relentless intensity that made the asphalt shimmer and dance. It was barely 9 o'clock, but the temperature had already climbed past 90 degrees, and the humidity wrapped around everything like a wet blanket. Lieutenant Sarah Collins adjusted her sunglasses and wiped a bead of sweat from her temple as she guided her patrol vehicle through the industrial district on the city's northwest side. Beside her, in the specially modified rear compartment, K-9 Max sat with his tongue lolling out, his amber eyes scanning the passing scenery with the alertness that had made him legendary within the Atlanta Police Department's K-9 unit. 7 years of partnership had forged an unbreakable bond between them, a connection that transcended words and operated on pure instinct. The radio crackled with routine traffic, a fender bender on Peachtree, a shoplifting call downtown, the usual symphony of urban chaos that formed the backdrop of every shift. Sarah reached for her coffee, now lukewarm and bitter, and took a sip as she turned onto River Road, a narrow two-lane that wound along the Chattahoochee River toward the old Weston Bridge. The Weston Bridge was a relic from another era, a wooden structure built in the 1920s that had somehow survived decades of floods, neglect, and budget cuts. It connected two aging industrial neighborhoods, serving mainly as a shortcut for truck drivers and locals who knew the area. The city had talked about replacing it for years, but the funds never materialized, and so it stood, creaking and groaning under every vehicle that crossed its weathered planks. Sarah had driven across the Weston Bridge hundreds of times without giving it a second thought. Today would be different. The call came in at 9:14, a report of suspicious activity near the bridge. A jogger had seen someone lurking underneath the structure in the pre-dawn hours, moving around with a flashlight. By the time patrol units arrived, whoever it was had vanished. But the jogger was insistent that something was wrong. Sarah and Max were closest, so dispatch sent them to take a look. She pulled up to the eastern approach of the bridge and killed the engine. The structure stretched before her, maybe 200 feet of wooden planks and steel supports spanning the slow-moving brown water below. A pickup truck rumbled across from the opposite direction, its tires thudding rhythmically against the gaps between the boards. Sarah stepped out of the vehicle and immediately felt the heat rise from the ground in waves. She opened the rear door, and Max bounded out, his sleek Belgian Malinois frame moving with the fluid grace of an athlete. He shook himself once, then looked up at her, awaiting instructions. They approached the bridge on foot. Sarah's boots crunched on the gravel shoulder as she scanned the area, looking for anything out of place. The jogger's report had been vague, just a figure with a light, nothing specific. It could have been a homeless person seeking shelter, or kids looking for a place to party, or a maintenance worker checking on the structure. 1,000 innocent explanations existed for what the jogger had seen, but as they reached the edge of the bridge, Max stopped. Sarah took 2 more steps before she realized her partner was no longer beside her. She turned to find Max frozen in place, his body rigid, his ears pitched forward at maximum attention. His nose twitched rapidly, processing scents that human senses could never detect. "Max, come!" Sarah commanded. The dog did not move. In 7 years of working together, Sarah had seen Max face down armed suspects, charge into burning buildings, and pursue fleeing criminals across rooftops. She had never seen him refuse a direct command. The sight of him standing there, every muscle locked, sent a chill down her spine despite the oppressive heat. She walked back to him and knelt beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder. His fur was hot from the sun, but beneath it, she could feel the tension thrumming through his body like an electrical current. "What is it, boy? What do you smell?" Max's response was to lower his head slightly and emit a low, almost inaudible whine. It was a sound Sarah had heard only a handful of times before, and always in situations involving the worst kinds of discoveries. It was the sound Max made when he detected death. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She stood and keyed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit K-9. I'm at the Weston Bridge on River Road. My partner is alerting to something. I need additional units and possibly crime scene. Hold all traffic on the bridge until further notice." The response came back with professional efficiency, confirming that backup was en route and that traffic control would be established. Sarah looked at the bridge, at the cars still crossing, unaware of what might lie beneath their wheels, and made a decision. She stepped onto the bridge and held up her hand, stopping an approaching sedan. The driver, a middle-aged woman in business attire, lowered her window with an expression of annoyance. "Ma'am, I need you to turn around. This bridge is closed." "Closed? I have to get to work." "What's going on?" "Police investigation. Please turn around and use an alternate route." The woman muttered something under her breath but complied, executing a three-point turn and driving away. Sarah repeated the process with two more vehicles before a patrol car arrived from the opposite end to establish a proper roadblock. With the bridge cleared, Sarah returned to Max. The dog had not moved from his position, his focus unwavering. "Show me," she said. Max began to move, not across the bridge but toward the embankment that led down to the water. Sarah followed, picking her way carefully down the steep slope covered in scrub brush and discarded trash. The smell of the river grew stronger, that distinctive muddy odor mixed with the industrial runoff that gave this stretch of the Chattahoochee its particular character. They reached the base of the bridge, where massive wooden pilings sank into the riverbed, and steel crossbeams created a lattice of shadows. The water lapped gently against the supports, barely a foot deep here during the dry season. Max splashed into the shallows without hesitation, moving toward the center of the structure. Sarah followed, her boots filling with warm water that squished with every step. She ducked under a crossbeam and found herself in a kind of cave formed by the bridge's understructure. Light filtered through the gaps in the planks above, creating bars of illumination that striped the darkness. Max stopped at one of the main support columns and sat down, his signal that he had found what he was looking for. Sarah pulled out her flashlight and clicked it on, sweeping the beam across the area. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Old tires, plastic bottles, a shopping cart half submerged in the mud. The typical detritus that accumulated under urban bridges. But then her light caught something else, a shape wedged into a gap between two support beams about 4 feet above the waterline. Sarah moved closer, her heart rate increasing despite her efforts to remain calm. The shape resolved into something recognizable, a bundle wrapped in dark plastic, secured with silver duct tape. It was roughly 6 feet long and cylindrical, and it did not belong here. She didn't need to open it to know what was inside. 7 years of police work and Max's unmistakable alert told her everything she needed to know. "Dispatch, this is Collins. We have a body." The next few hours dissolved into the controlled chaos of a major crime scene investigation. Yellow tape went up around the bridge approaches. The medical examiner's van arrived, followed by the crime scene unit's mobile lab. Detectives showed up in unmarked cars, their faces grim in the summer heat. Sarah and Max remained on scene, providing security and answering questions while the forensic specialists did their work. The body, a male in his 30s, had been wrapped in construction-grade plastic and secured with multiple layers of tape. He had been dead for approximately 3 days, according to the ME's preliminary assessment. Cause of death appeared to be blunt force trauma to the head, though the full autopsy would provide more details. What drew the most attention, however, was the discovery of additional evidence. While searching the bridge's understructure, the crime scene team found a waterproof bag tucked into a crevice near where the body had been hidden. Inside the bag were 3 cell phones, a laptop computer, and nearly $50,000 in cash. This wasn't a random dump site, Detective Marcus Reed observed, standing beside Sarah on the riverbank. He was a 20-year veteran of Atlanta PD's Homicide Division, A heavy-set man with a shaved head and the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much. Someone chose this location carefully. The bridge, the water access, the structure providing concealment. This is professional. Any ID on the victim? Sarah asked. Nothing on the body. We're running prints now. But my gut says this guy was involved in something serious. That much cash, multiple phones, the laptop. He was either running something or he was about to flip on someone who was. Sarah looked at Max, who sat patiently beside her, his work done for now. The dog had no understanding of the complexities of human crime, but his instincts had once again proven invaluable. Max found him, she said. He knew something was wrong before we even stepped onto the bridge. Reed nodded, regarding the dog with respect. Best nose in the department. You two have quite a reputation. The investigation expanded rapidly over the following days. The victim was identified as Daniel Mercer, a former accountant who had disappeared 2 weeks earlier. His family had filed a missing persons report, describing him as troubled, but not the type to simply vanish. He had struggled with gambling debts in the past, but had supposedly gotten his life back together. The laptop provided the breakthrough. Mercer had been keeping meticulous records of financial transactions, money flowing through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts. The amounts were staggering. Millions of dollars moving in patterns that forensic accountants recognized as classic money laundering. But it was the connections that made Sarah's blood run cold. "Captain, we have a problem," Detective Reed said during a briefing 3 days after the initial discovery. "Some of these transactions are linked to accounts that received deposits from the Atlanta Police Department's Asset Forfeiture Fund." Captain Diana Vance, a 25-year veteran who commanded the Major Crimes Division, leaned forward in her chair. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her dark eyes carried the weight of authority. "Explain." Reed pulled up a chart on the conference room screen. "The money moves through a series of shell companies, very sophisticated stuff. But when we trace it back, some of it originates from police accounts. Someone inside our department has been siphoning money from seized assets and funneling it into this network." The room fell silent. Corruption within the department was every officer's nightmare. The kind of scandal that destroyed careers, shattered public trust, and undermined everything they worked for. "How high does this go?"
What was it,
Vance
Max?
asked.
What were you trying to show me at
"We
the
don't
bridge?
know yet. But here's the thing, Captain." Reed clicked to another slide. Daniel Mercer wasn't just laundering money, he was keeping a dead man's switch. According to his files, if anything happened to him, information would automatically be released to federal authorities and media outlets. And that's why he was killed, Sarah said, understanding dawning. Someone found out about the dead man's switch and decided to silence him before he could trigger it. Exactly. But they may have been too late. Mercer's files indicate that the timer was set to activate 72 hours after his death if he didn't enter a code. That window passed 2 days ago. "So the information is out there?" Vance asked. "We don't know. The release mechanism was supposed to send encrypted emails to multiple recipients, but we haven't found any evidence of media coverage or federal action. Either the system failed or someone intercepted the transmission." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If someone within the department had the capability to intercept Mercer's dead man's switch, they had access to sophisticated surveillance technology. That meant they were high-ranking, well-connected, and extremely dangerous. "We need to work this quietly," Vance said, "until we know who's involved. We trust no one outside this room. Collins, I want you and Max to continue investigating the bridge. Mercer chose that location for a reason. Find out why." Sarah accepted the assignment with a nod, but a knot of anxiety had formed in her stomach. She trusted Max with her life, but the prospect of hunting a corrupt cop, someone who wore the same badge, who might have access to her movements, her schedule, her personal information, was deeply unsettling. That night, she sat on her apartment balcony with Max at her feet, watching the Atlanta skyline glitter in the darkness. The city looked peaceful from up here, a tapestry of lights and shadows that concealed the ugly truths lurking beneath the surface. "What did you smell, Max?" she murmured, scratching behind his ears. "What were you trying to tell me?" The dog looked up at her with those intelligent amber eyes, and for a moment Sarah could have sworn he understood everything. Every word, every fear, every uncertainty. He pressed his head against her knee, offering the only comfort he could. Sleep didn't come easily that night. The investigation into the Weston Bridge led Sarah down paths she never expected. She spent hours studying the structure's history, interviewing maintenance workers, and reviewing old inspection reports. What she discovered was disturbing. The bridge had been scheduled for renovation 3 times in the past decade. Each time, the project had been cancelled due to budget constraints. But when Sarah dug into the financial records, she found irregularities. Funds had been allocated for the bridge work, but the money had been redirected to other projects that existed only on paper. Someone had been using the Weston Bridge as more than a body dump site. They had been using it as a money pit, a convenient excuse for budget manipulation that allowed millions of dollars to disappear into the shadows. Sarah shared her findings with Captain Vance and Detective Reed during a covert meeting at a coffee shop far from headquarters. The bridge renovation contracts were awarded to companies that don't exist, she explained, sliding a folder across the table. Ghost corporations that received payments and then dissolved. The money went into the same shell company network that Mercer was tracking. Reed whistled low. So whoever killed Mercer has been running this scheme for years. The bridge isn't just a dump site, it's the center of their operation. And they chose it because they control it, Vance added. They know when inspections happen, when maintenance is scheduled, who has access. It's the perfect cover. Sarah nodded. But here's what I don't understand. Why kill Mercer now? He'd been laundering their money for months, maybe years. What changed? Reed pulled out his phone and showed them a photograph. "We found this in Mercer's apartment, hidden in a book on his shelf." The image showed a group of men standing in front of the Weston Bridge. They were dressed in suits, smiling for the camera, like politicians at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Sarah recognized several of them immediately. "That's Deputy Chief Morrison," she said, pointing to a silver-haired man in the center of the group. "And that's Councilman Briggs, the one who oversees the city's infrastructure budget." "Now look at this one," Reed said, zooming in on a figure at the edge of the photograph. A younger man, standing slightly apart from the others, his face partially obscured by shadow. Sarah studied the image, trying to make out the features. There was something familiar about the posture, the way the man held himself. A cop's stance, feet planted, shoulders square. "I can't tell who it is," she admitted. "The quality isn't good enough. Neither can we," Vance said. "But whoever he is, he's the key. Mercer had this photo hidden for a reason. I think he was planning to use it as leverage, and I think that's what got him killed." The investigation entered a dangerous new phase. Sarah and Max continued their official duties, responding to calls and maintaining their cover as ordinary patrol officers. But every spare moment was devoted to unraveling the conspiracy. They returned to the bridge multiple times, always under the pretense of follow-up investigation. Max's nose led them to additional discoveries, traces of evidence that the initial search had missed. A partial fingerprint on one of the support beams, fibers caught in the rough wood, a cigarette butt wedged into a crack. Each piece of evidence was collected quietly and analyzed through trusted contacts outside the department's normal chain of custody. The picture that emerged was both clearer and more frightening. The operation centered on the bridge had been running for at least 5 years. During that time, an estimated $12 million had been laundered through the ghost contracts and shell companies. The money came from various sources: drug trafficking, illegal gambling, protection rackets, a criminal enterprise operating in plain sight, protected by badges and political connections. But it was the body count that haunted Sarah. Daniel Mercer was not the first victim to be hidden beneath the bridge's planks. Forensic analysis of the soil samples taken from the site revealed traces of human decomposition at multiple locations. The ME estimated that at least 4 other bodies had been disposed of there over the years, their remains washed away by floods or consumed by the river's slow current. 5 people, Sarah thought as she reviewed the files late one night. 5 lives erased to protect a money laundering scheme. And those were just the ones they knew about. Max lifted his head from his bed in the corner of her home office, sensing her distress. He padded over and rested his chin on her knee, offering his silent support. "We're going to get them, boy," she whispered. "I promise." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks into the investigation, Sarah received an anonymous message through a secure channel that Captain Vance had established. The message contained a single sentence and an attachment. "I know who killed Mercer. Meet me at the old textile mill on Decatur Street. Come alone. Midnight." Every instinct told Sarah this was a trap. The location was isolated, an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. The timing was suspicious. The demand to come alone was the oldest trick in the book. But the attachment changed everything. It was a photograph, clearer than the one found in Mercer's apartment, showing the same group of men in front of the bridge. This time, the face of the mystery figure was visible. Sarah stared at the screen, her blood turning to ice. It was Sergeant Frank Hollis. Hollis was a 30-year veteran of the Atlanta Police Department, a decorated officer who had served in nearly every division. He was 6 months from retirement, beloved by his colleagues, and considered beyond reproach. He had trained Sarah when she was a rookie, had attended her promotion ceremony, had sent her a card when she and Max received the department's highest commendation. He was also apparently part of a criminal conspiracy that had resulted in multiple murders. Sarah's first instinct was denial. There had to be a mistake. The photo could be doctored. Someone was trying to frame a good cop, but even as she constructed these excuses, she knew they were hollow. The evidence didn't lie. Max's nose didn't lie. And deep down, something had always felt slightly off about Hollis, a darkness behind his friendly smile that she had never allowed herself to examine. She picked up her phone and called Captain Vance. An hour later, they were assembled in Vance's living room, the captain in her bathrobe, and Reed looking like he hadn't slept in days. Sarah laid out the message and the photograph, watching their reactions. "Hollis," Reed breathed, shaking his head. "I've known that man for 15 years. I would have staked my career on his integrity." "Which is exactly why they chose him," Vance said, her voice heavy with resignation. "The perfect cover. No one would ever suspect." "What do we do?" Sarah asked. "The meeting is in 4 hours. If I don't show up, we might lose our only chance to identify the source. But if it's a trap, walking in alone is suicide." Vance was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the photograph. Then she looked up at Sarah with an expression of grim determination. "You won't be alone," she said. "We're going to end this tonight." The old textile mill loomed against the night sky like a skeleton of industrial ambition. Its windows were shattered, its walls covered in graffiti, its vast interior spaces given over to shadows and decay. Sarah approached from the east, moving through the overgrown parking lot with Max at her side. She wasn't wearing a wire. That had been Vance's decision, on the theory that anyone sophisticated enough to run this operation would certainly scan for surveillance equipment. Instead, Reed and a small team of trusted officers were positioned around the perimeter, ready to move in at the first sign of trouble. Sarah's hand rested on her service weapon as she reached the mill's main entrance, a rusted door hanging askew on broken hinges. She paused, listening.
What do we do now?
The night was quiet, except for the distant hum of highway traffic and the chirping of crickets in the weeds. Max's ears swiveled forward, tracking something she couldn't hear. His body tensed, but he didn't alert. Whoever was inside was alive and waiting. She pushed through the door and stepped into darkness. The interior of the mill was a maze of abandoned machinery and collapsed catwalks. Moonlight filtered through holes in the roof, creating pools of silver illumination amid the black. Sarah moved forward slowly, her flashlight sweeping the space ahead. Lieutenant Collins. The voice came from somewhere above, echoing off the concrete walls. Sarah spun, trying to locate the source. "Who's there? Show yourself." A figure emerged from behind a rusted boiler, hands raised to show they were empty. It was a woman in her 40s, dressed in dark clothing, her face haggard with exhaustion and fear. "My name is Rachel Mercer," she said. "Daniel was my brother." Sarah kept her weapon trained on the woman, but felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. This wasn't an ambush. At least not yet. "You sent the message," Sarah said. "You know who killed your brother." Rachel nodded, stepping closer. "I know everything. Daniel told me. He knew they were going to kill him, so he made sure I had copies of all his files. Everything he was doing, everyone who was involved. Then why contact me? Why not go to the FBI?" "Because the FBI is compromised too," Rachel said, her voice bitter. "Daniel tried that 6 months ago. He reached out to an agent he thought he could trust. 2 weeks later, that agent died in a car accident. Single vehicle, no witnesses. Daniel knew then that there was nowhere safe to turn." Sarah lowered her weapon slightly. "Why me? Because you're clean." Daniel researched everyone in the department, looking for someone without connections to the network. "You came up spotless, you and your dog." She almost smiled. "He said that anyone with a partner like Max had to be trustworthy. Dogs know." Max had moved to Rachel's side and was sniffing her hand, his tail wagging slowly. Whatever his judgment of human character, he apparently approved of Daniel Mercer's sister. "Tell me what you know," Sarah said. Rachel's story took nearly an hour to tell. Daniel Mercer had stumbled into the conspiracy by accident, hired by one of the shell companies to manage their books without understanding what he was really doing. By the time he realized the truth, he was in too deep to simply walk away. "So he did the only thing he could think of," Rachel explained. "He started gathering evidence, recording conversations, copying files, building a case that would bring the whole thing down. The conspiracy was larger than Sarah had imagined. It wasn't just about the bridge or the money laundering. It was a network that extended throughout the city's power structure, connecting corrupt cops to dirty politicians to organized crime figures. Deputy Chief Morrison was involved, as they had suspected. So was Councilman Briggs. And at the center of it all, coordinating operations and eliminating threats, was Sergeant Frank Hollis. "Hollis is the fixer," Rachel said. "Whenever someone becomes a problem, he makes them disappear. My brother, the FBI agent, others you don't even know about. He's been doing it for years, and he's very, very good at it." "How do we stop him?" Sarah asked. "Daniel's dead man's switch," Rachel said. "The one they thought they intercepted. It was a decoy. The real switch is still active, set to release everything to a dozen different media outlets and law enforcement agencies. All I have to do is enter the code." "Then do it," Sarah urged. "End this now." Rachel shook her head. "It's not that simple. The code has to be entered from a specific terminal. A computer in my brother's office at the shell company. He set it up that way so it couldn't be triggered accidentally or under duress. If I enter the code from anywhere else, the system erases itself." Sarah understood the problem immediately. The office would be watched. Walking in there was as good as painting a target on their backs. "We'll need a distraction," she said. Something to draw their attention away while you access the terminal. I might be able to help with that. The new voice came from the shadows near the far wall. Sarah's weapon snapped up, and Max erupted into barking that echoed through the cavernous space. A figure stepped into the moonlight, hands raised. It was Detective Reed. "Stand down, Collins," he said calmly. "I followed you here. I had a feeling you might need backup." Sarah hesitated, her mind racing. Reed was one of the few people she trusted, but in a conspiracy this large, trust was a dangerous commodity. "How much did you hear?" she demanded. "Enough." He lowered his hands slowly. "And I can help. I know Hollis's schedule. I know where he'll be tomorrow night. We can use that to create your distraction." Sarah looked at Max, whose barking had subsided to a low growl. The dog was staring at Reed with an intensity that could mean anything. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. Reed reached into his jacket, and Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. But he only pulled out a photograph, which he tossed at her feet. "Because I've been working this case longer than you have," he said. "I've been building evidence against Hollis for 3 years, ever since he killed my partner." Sarah picked up the photograph. It showed a younger Reed standing next to a smiling woman in police uniform. "Detective Angela Foster," Reed said quietly. "She got too close to the truth back in 2021. Hollis staged it as a robbery gone wrong. I've been waiting for the right moment to take him down ever since." The three of them spent the remaining hours before dawn planning their operation. Rachel would approach the Shell Company office through a service entrance that Daniel had identified in his files. Reed would feed false information to Hollis, suggesting that a witness in an unrelated case was about to flip, drawing him across town at the critical moment. And Sarah would provide security for Rachel, with Max as her early warning system. It was a desperate plan, with 1,000 ways to go wrong, but it was the only plan they had. Captain Vance was informed through secure channels and reluctantly approved the operation. She would coordinate backup from a distance, ready to move in once the dead man's switch was triggered and the evidence was public. The following night, Sarah found herself crouched in an alley behind a nondescript office building in Midtown, watching Rachel Mercer pick the lock on a service entrance. Max sat beside her, alert but calm, his training keeping him silent despite the tension in the air. The lock clicked open. Rachel glanced back at Sarah with an expression of terrified determination, then slipped inside. Sarah counted the seconds in her head, tracking Rachel's progress through the building based on the timeline they had established. 30 seconds to the stairwell, 45 seconds to the second floor, 60 seconds to the office door. At 90 seconds, her earpiece crackled with Reed's voice. "We have a problem. Hollis didn't take the bait. He's still at the precinct." Sarah's blood ran cold. If Hollis was at the precinct, he might have access to surveillance systems that could detect Rachel's intrusion. He might already know what they were doing. "Can you delay him?" she whispered. "I'm trying. But Collins, there's something else. He's not alone. Morrison is with him, and they're gearing up like they're expecting a fight." Sarah made a decision. Get Vance. Tell her to move now. We're out of time. She rose from her crouch and sprinted toward the service entrance, Max at her heels. The plan had called for her to wait outside, maintaining security and providing an escape route. But if Hollis and Morrison were on their way, Rachel needed help immediately. The interior of the building was dark and silent. Sarah moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, her flashlight off, relying on the dim emergency lighting to guide her way. Max padded beside her, his nails clicking softly on the linoleum floor. They found Rachel in a small office on the second floor, sitting at a computer terminal with sweat dripping down her face. "I'm in," she said without looking up, "but the system is requiring additional authentication." Daniel's files didn't mention this. "How long? I don't know. Minutes, maybe longer." Sarah positioned herself by the door, her weapon ready. "We might not have minutes. They're coming." The next few moments stretched into an eternity. Sarah listened for sounds of approach while Rachel's fingers flew across the keyboard. Max stood rigid beside her, his ears tracking every creak and groan of the old building. Then Max's head snapped toward the stairwell, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. "They're here," Sarah breathed. "Almost got it," Rachel said, desperation in her voice. "Just a few more seconds." Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, multiple people moving fast. Sarah raised her weapon and prepared to make a stand. The door burst open. Sarah had a split second to register Frank Hollis's face, twisted with rage, before Max launched himself through the air. 70 pounds of Belgian Malinois hit Hollis square in the chest, driving him backward into the hallway with a crash. "Got it!" Rachel screamed. "The switch is triggered!" But there were more of them coming. Sarah saw Morrison behind Hollis and two other figures in tactical gear. She fired twice, forcing them to take cover, then grabbed Rachel and pulled her toward the window. "Fire escape," she ordered. "Go!" Rachel scrambled through the window and onto the rusty metal structure outside. Sarah turned back to see Max still engaged with Hollis, the man desperately trying to throw off the dog's attack. Morrison was raising his weapon, taking aim at Max. Sarah didn't hesitate. She fired 3 times and Morrison went down. "Max, release!" The dog disengaged instantly, sprinting toward Sarah as Hollis stumbled to his feet, blood streaming from bite wounds on his arms. Sarah backed toward the window, keeping her weapon trained on the doorway. "This isn't over, Collins," Hollis snarled. "You have no idea what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done," she replied, "and I'd do it again." She climbed through the window and descended the fire escape with Max somehow keeping pace beside her. Sirens were wailing in the distance, growing closer. Vance's backup was arriving. They hit the ground running, finding Rachel waiting in the alley below. The 3 of them made it to the rendezvous point just as the first police cars screamed around the corner, lights blazing. The next few hours were chaos. The evidence released by Daniel Mercer's Dead Man's Switch exploded across the internet, and news networks like a bomb. Financial records, recordings, photographs, names, dates, amounts. The entire rotten structure of the conspiracy laid bare for the world to see. Deputy Chief Morrison died in surgery from Sarah's gunshots. Sergeant Frank Hollis was arrested at the scene, along with the 2 men in tactical gear who turned out to be private contractors with military backgrounds. Councilman Briggs was taken into custody at his home, still in his pajamas, as federal agents swarmed the building. Over the following days, more arrests followed. Bankers, lawyers, businessmen, police officers. The network that had operated in the shadows for years was dragged into the harsh light of public scrutiny. Sarah gave her statement a dozen times to Internal Affairs, to the FBI, to federal prosecutors building cases against the conspirators. She answered every question honestly and completely, holding nothing back. Through it all, Max stayed by her side. In the interrogation rooms, in the hallways of the federal building, in the quiet moments when Sarah sat alone trying to process what had happened, he was her anchor, her constant, her reminder that some bonds could not be corrupted. The official commendation ceremony was held 6 weeks later in the same auditorium where Sarah had received her lieutenant's bars 3 years earlier. The room was packed with officers, officials, and media, all gathered to witness the recognition of those who had brought down the conspiracy. Captain Vance, newly promoted to deputy chief in Morrison's place, stood at the podium with a row of medals on a velvet cushion beside her. "The officers we honor today represent the best of what law enforcement can be," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "They faced corruption within our own ranks, risked their lives and careers to pursue justice, and ultimately prevailed against overwhelming odds." She picked up the first medal, the Atlanta Police Department's Medal of Valor. "Lieutenant Sarah Collins, please step forward." Sarah rose from her seat, her dress uniform immaculate, and walked to the stage. Max walked beside her, his own chest adorned with a special commendation ribbon that the department had created specifically for K-9 officers. As Vance pinned the medal to her uniform, Sarah looked out at the assembled crowd. She saw Reed, his arm in a sling from a wound sustained during the operation. She saw Rachel Mercer, seated in the front row, with tears streaming down her face. She saw dozens of officers she had worked with over the years, their expressions a mixture of pride and reflection. But mostly, she saw the empty chairs. The places where Morrison and Hollis and others would have sat, officers she had once trusted, now revealed as something far darker. The conspiracy had been defeated, but its shadow would linger over the department for years to come. After the ceremony, Sarah found a quiet moment on the building's rooftop, away from the congratulations and camera flashes. Max sat beside her, and together they watched the sun set over Atlanta, painting the skyline in shades of gold and crimson. "We did good, boy," she murmured, running her fingers through his fur. Daniel Mercer, Angela Foster, all the others, they got their justice. Max leaned against her leg, his warmth a comfort against the evening chill. Whatever he understood of human concepts like justice or vengeance, he knew that his partner was hurting. And he knew that his job, as it had always been, was to be there for her. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Reed. The FBI was requesting her presence at a briefing tomorrow. Something about additional evidence found in Hollis's personal files, connections to criminal networks in other cities. The conspiracy, it seemed, was larger than anyone had realized. She sighed and pocketed the phone. Tomorrow's problems could wait for tomorrow. For now, she had the sunset, the city spread out before her like a promise, and her partner beside her. She had survived. She had prevailed. And whatever came next, she would face it the same way she had faced everything else, one step at a time, one day at a time, with Max at her side. The Weston Bridge reopened 2 months later after a complete structural inspection and renovation. The City Council, chastened by the scandal that had originated there, fast-tracked the funding that should have been allocated years ago. New planks replaced the rotting wood. Fresh paint covered the rusted steel. Safety rails were installed along the edges. Sarah drove across it on the day it reopened, Max in his usual spot in the back seat. The bridge felt different now, solid and secure, its dark secrets washed away by the river that flowed beneath it. She stopped at the center and got out, leaning against the rail to watch the water. A jogger passed behind her, offering a friendly wave. A pickup truck rumbled by, its driver nodding in greeting. Life continued, as it always did, oblivious to the horrors that had once lurked in the shadows. Max jumped out of the vehicle and joined her at the rail, his nose working the air. Whatever scents he detected now, they were ordinary ones. River water and fish, exhaust fumes and hot asphalt. The smells of a city going about its business. No death, no decay, no secrets. Sarah scratched behind his ears, and Max's tail wagged happily. For a dog who had uncovered so much darkness, he had a remarkable ability to live in the present, to find joy in simple moments, to leave the past behind. Maybe there was a lesson in that. "Come on, boy," she said finally, straightening up. "We've got work to do." They got back in the vehicle and drove across the bridge, leaving the Weston Bridge behind them. But Sarah knew she would return. The bridge was part of her story now, a marker in her journey from patrol officer to something more. Whatever that something was, she would discover it in time. For now, she had a city to protect, a partner to rely on, and a future to build. The traffic flowed steadily across the bridge, dozens of vehicles carrying hundreds of people about their daily lives. None of them knew what had been hidden beneath the planks. None of them understood the price that had been paid to bring the truth to light. But Sarah knew, and Max knew, and that was enough. The radio crackled with a new call, a report of suspicious activity on the south side. Sarah acknowledged and turned the vehicle toward the address, her mind already shifting to the next challenge. In Atlanta, there was always another case, another mystery, another chance to make a difference. And Lieutenant Sarah Collins and her partner Max would be there to answer the call. The summer heat had finally broken, replaced by the first hints of autumn. Leaves were beginning to turn on the trees that lined the city's older neighborhoods, splashes of red and gold against the grey concrete. Sarah noticed these things now in a way she hadn't before. Small details of beauty in a world that often seemed consumed by ugliness. The department had changed in the wake of the scandal. New policies were implemented, new oversight committees formed, new training programs designed to prevent corruption from taking root again. Whether these measures would prove effective remained to be seen, but there was at least a sense of renewed commitment to the ideals that had drawn Sarah to law enforcement in the first place. She'd been offered a promotion, a captain's position in a newly created anti-corruption unit. The assignment would mean less time in the field, more time behind a desk, but it would also give her the authority to continue the work she had started, to root out the remnants of the conspiracy, to ensure that the sacrifice of Daniel Mercer and others had not been in vain. She hadn't accepted yet. The decision weighed on her, complicated by considerations both professional and personal. "What do you think, Max?" she asked one evening, sitting on her balcony as the sun dipped below the horizon. "Should we take the promotion?" Max lifted his head from his paws and regarded her with those intelligent amber eyes. His tail thumped once against the concrete, neither an endorsement nor a rejection. "Helpful as always," she muttered, but she was smiling. The truth was she already knew what she would decide. The streets had been her home for years, the patrol car her office, the unpredictable rhythm of emergency calls her daily soundtrack. Leaving that behind felt like abandoning a part of herself. But the work that needed to be done couldn't be done from a patrol car. The corruption that had festered in the department had roots that went deep, and pulling them out required authority, resources, and a long-term perspective. It required someone willing to fight a different kind of battle, one waged in conference rooms and courtrooms rather than alleys and warehouses. It required her. She picked up her phone and dialed Captain Vance's number. "I'm in," she said when the captain answered. "When do I start?" There was a pause, then Vance's voice, warm with approval. "I was hoping you'd say that. We'll do the paperwork tomorrow. And Collins, you made the right choice." Sarah ended the call and looked at Max. The dog had risen to his feet, sensing that something important had happened. His tail was wagging now, a steady rhythm that matched her own heartbeat. "We're not done yet, boy," she told him. "We've got a lot more work to do." Max barked once, a sound that echoed across the balcony and out into the gathering night. It was a sound of agreement, of readiness, of partnership renewed. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they always had. The city of Atlanta spread out before them, millions of lights flickering to life as darkness fell. Somewhere out there, crimes were being committed, conspiracies were being hatched, and innocent people were suffering at the hands of those who believed themselves above the law. But there were also people fighting back, good cops who still believed in justice, prosecutors who wouldn't be intimidated, citizens who refused to look the other way. The conspiracy that had been exposed was just one battle in a much larger war, a war that would never truly end. Sarah understood that now. The job wasn't about winning. It was about not giving up. It was about showing up every day, doing the work, and trusting that the small victories would add up to something meaningful. She had Max. She had her badge. She had her integrity. It was enough. The autumn breeze carried the scent of change, of endings and beginnings intertwined. Sarah breathed it in and felt something like peace settle over her. Tomorrow, she would begin her new assignment. Tomorrow, she would start building a team, reviewing cases, planning operations. Tomorrow, the hard work would resume. But tonight, she had this moment, this view, this partner. She reached down and ruffled the fur on Max's neck. feeling the warmth of him, the solid reality of his presence. "Good boy," she whispered. "You're a good boy." Max's tail wagged, and his tongue lolled out in what could only be described as a grin. They stayed on the balcony until the stars appeared, woman and dog sharing the silence, needing no words. In the morning, there would be work to do. But for now, this was enough. This was everything.